education, healthcare, Social Security, and infrastructure. These are just a few federal programs that are, admittedly, underfunded. Obviously, everyone wishes that all programs should receive their ideal amount. But my partner Nikki and I, we're realists, and as realists, we prioritize. So we inherently do not believe and resolve that the United States federal government should substantially increase their investment in transportation infrastructure. As a country, the U.S. is definitely in a recession. Our debt as of today is $16 trillion. We are predicted to default on our loans, and we just barely avoided jumping off the fiscal cliff. Our keystone philosophy is, why fix the road without money to buy a car? And to us, repairing and improving transportation infrastructure while our country is on the brink of economic collapse, and so many people cannot even afford to cruise on those newly paved highways, is a prime example of that. We are fixing something that is about a 3 out of 10 in need and ignoring things that are about an 11. Before we even get into raising the funding, let's go over to the status quo. So, as of right now, out of the $2.1 trillion in mandatory spending, transportation, transportation receives 3% of that. That comes out to be $63 billion. $63 billion. And they propose that we have $93 billion each year. So that's $30 billion extra. Just keep that in mind, okay? But doesn't it seem greedy to ask for more? Isn't $63 billion enough? Why are they asking for 50% extra? In total, they receive the same amount of funding from the government as education. Okay, whatever. Just go all the way down. Okay. So transportation receives 2%, so does education. So are they saying that you being able to drive on a new road is more important than people in the inner city having new books? Because not everybody in the school system isn't perfect. Sorry. So did I mention in the interest of our $16 trillion of debt, only 7% of our budget is put aside? So they're asking for half of that amount to go towards debt. So they get half that amount for funding, and they're asking for more, even though we pay very little to pay back our debt. So our country is literally on the brink of collapse. Our debt ceiling needs to be raised in the near future, or we will default on our loan as a country. That is, unless Congress can agree to raise it. And considering our congressmen seem to care more about their political standings than our country's well-being, well, it seems like we'll have another 11th hour delay, like December 31st, 2012. So how is it exactly that we will convince them to discuss and agree on extra funding? But while we are on the subject of the fiscal cliff, let's dive into that anti-climatic debacle, shall we? So, according to nationalpriorities.org, which is a non-biased website whose only mission is to inform the general public on the federal budget, the fiscal cliff has been diffused but not entirely solved. Basically, the middle class, the tax rates for the middle class have become permanent, and they raise the tax rates for the extremely wealthy, which is about 1% of the American population. But here's the kicker. No one has decided where this money will go. Some would like to use it to increase our investment in the military, some for education, and some like our opponents. I seriously predict that our opponents may try to spin this extra tax revenue as a way to increase our investment in infrastructure. And it will, and can, when we relocate to a perfect world. But unfortunately, we live in the real world, where our country is in $1 trillion of debt, and counting, as you see behind me. This brings me to our counter plan. Instead of pouring more borrowed money into transportation, why shouldn't we invest in paying back our loans? Basically, the federal government will not pour money into transportation. The state governments will convince private companies to invest in improving transportation, or at least improving transportation, not building new. Chris Edwards from Cato Institute believes transportation is the answer. Transportation privatization is the answer. This will become a band-aid, so that if and when the U.S. economy is stable and the federal government would like to invest more of the taxpayers' dollars, they can. Think about it. In order for the USA to be able to help everyone, it really needs to be able to stand on its 2 feet. And to Nikki and I, this includes becoming more economically sound. We believe the first step to improvement is to start really making a dent in our debt and depending on a private company to improve our infrastructure. Alan Greenspan, an American economist who served as chairman of the Federal Reserve of the USA, once said, "Paying down the national debt is beneficial for the economy. It keeps interest rates lower than they otherwise would, boosting productivity and real incomes. But just know this, for many other government programs, no matter what we do, the budget cuts are imminent. Due to a legislation passed in August of 2011, the federal government will cut $55 billion from a domestic programs budget. This includes education and infrastructure and other government programs. So, just to recap, our opponents hope to ask for more money to be put into their bucket, even though they already have $63 billion, and the government is already set to take away some money from them. And it just doesn't seem logical. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, investing more in transportation is undesirable, because if we are going to invest more money into anything, it should benefit everybody, not just people who own cars, such as investing more in education or paying our national debt. It is also impractical because of our $16 trillion in debt, the imminent ceiling debacle, and the fact that the government has already decided to cut funding. Remember, a vote for negative is a vote to help all Americans.